Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cloud Whisperers. I'm David Broussard, and you might notice that I'm missing somebody. Brian couldn't be here today, but we do have a fantastic guest for you who I've known for many, many years, and their story is actually really exciting in talking about their journey. As a person in tech who had to leave the industry and has now come back, and it's a fascinating journey throughout this entire process. So without any further ado, we're going to launch into. So normally we do, what have we been up to lately? And Brian isn't here, so we're going to skip that part, and we're going to kind of skip right into episode 42, Life, the Universe, and Cloud Whisperers. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in my good friend, Jenn Caland, who is joining us from across the pond, where she now lives in Wigan, England. Is that right? And now
That's
Wigan
correct.
is so for those people who are geography nerds like I am, where in England is Wigan?
It's almost perfectly in between Manchester and Liverpool. I mean, if you
Okay.
hit it on the dartboard, you know.
Okay. So up in the north then.
Yes, we are
So
definitely the Northwest.
definitely in the Northwest. Okay, excellent. All right. And so I guess everybody around there's going to be like a Manchester United football fan, or are they going to be something
Don't be too.
else? Don't be too
No,
sure.
not
Okay.
yeah. It all overlaps, and I don't get into the rivalry there myself. I mean,
There
I've
we go.
got friends on all sides, and my neutrality is usually very helpful.
Probably smart. I mean, of course, we
Mm.
we Americans now we know everything about English football because we watch Ted Lasso, and so because we've now watched Ted Lasso, we're all experts on the FA Cup and relegation and promotion and all that kind of stuff. So So anyway,
Mm.
so Jenn, you and I've known each other for a very long time. Uh, and the reason I wanted to invite you on to this particular session, this episode of the podcast, was to talk a little bit about your journey. And so, first off, what are you doing right now? Kind of what is it that you do in tech today?
Okay. Don't use any swear words because I use a different tech
Well,
stack than you.
it's okay. It's perfectly okay.
No, so I am a data analyst for a company that's called CTS.
Mhm,
CTS is the largest Europe-based Google consultancy
mhm,
for cloud, for all things cloud in Google. So yeah, I'm a data analyst there. I help clients on their data journey get started with their data journeys. I train them on how to use some of the uh, some of the tech stack there. I might implement, proofs of concept or proofs of value just to see if the cloud technology works for them, and
mhm.
then otherwise support our customers there based on, what's been built in the past. Either they've gone off and built it after I've trained them, or it's something we've built for them. So
Okay. And so, with the data you're talking about, unstructured data like documents, or is it structured data like database tables, or is it a
all
little bit
the
of everything?
above.
All of the
All
above.
the
Okay.
above. Yeah, because I mean, while I'm in analytics and everything, of course, we've got an engineering team that will,
Mhm,
create the data pipelines and everything for data warehousing, that sort of thing, from
mhm,
which then that data can get pulled into some of the BI tools are most popular in the Google sphere, which is, of course, Looker Studio, formerly known as
mhm.
Data Studio, or Looker.
Okay. Yeah, one of the interesting things I found out recently is that Microsoft actually promotes an entire class of partners that they call regional directors. And regional directors are people who are skilled across multiple stacks of technology. And so,
Mm,
if you want to be an RD for Microsoft, you, just knowing the Microsoft stack isn't enough. You also have to know either Google or Amazon and understand, so because they Microsoft wants people who can go in and talk to organizations about the various stacks, and if somebody happens to be or really a lot of organizations will use multiple stacks, right? Because they say, well, I don't want to be beholden to one cloud provider. I want to make sure
Yeah.
that if something really weird happened and the Microsoft cloud went down for some reason, we want to be able to be sure our clients can still get to stuff that's in Google or in AWS and stuff like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with multi-cloud and everything, one of the advantages there, of course, is, well, don't swear. Well, Google has an amazing network,
sure.
backups, that sort of thing, within regions, multi-regions,
Hmm.
backup, that sort of thing. Inevitably though, especially for some industries, let's take fintech for instance,
Hmm.
where they definitely want to have all the backups all the time,
Yeah.
everything up running all the time. So a lot of organizations will choose multi-cloud in that
Yeah.
circumstance, just to keep things ticking over all the time.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I've done many a discussion with organizations about using G Suite, right, for email, for documents, for sites, things like that, Google Drive, and it there's a bit of a headache there. I mean, trying to translate Google Drive into say SharePoint and OneDrive, just because there's a major paradigm shift in how those things are designed to work with each other. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, in some ways, I actually think the Google Drive is more sensical in how it stores and does that stuff. But when I'm talking to people who are trying to move into OneDrive or whatever, we don't say things like that, right? That's, I'm sure you can understand, but it's
Yeah.
it's fine. So that's great. So what I wanted to kind of hear from you is look, you when did you get started in computer programming, in tech and stuff like that? It was
God,
a
that
long.
must have been
I know
like,
it's like
yeah,
it's like me. I've been doing this since I graduated college in 1990, and it's
I was going to
amazing.
say like around 1995, I think is where I
Yeah,
got started.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
and so what did you do when you first started? What kind of IT work were you doing back then?
well, I mean, back then in 1995, 96, it was kind of
Hmm.
like where the World Wide Web was opening up. Back in the
Yeah,
days
yeah,
of like AOL online and things like that, people were building websites and stuff. So of course I picked up HTML straight away because
sure.
I wanted to create things, this is new, interesting to me. Anyways,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
not interesting to a lot of folks I know, but I loved it. Um, but I mean, also, I mean, I grew up with having a computer in the house in the first place. I mean, I had an uncle who actually worked for Microsoft way
Hmm.
back when,
Okay.
and we had oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. We had one computer. The second computer was actually like a Tandy. I remember like
Oh
using
yeah,
WordStar and stuff like that and printing off, stuff for high school on the dot matrix printer and of
yeah.
course the all that.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yep. Another one.
Getting
Yeah,
on
I remember.
BB.
I remember working in WordStar. Yep. Control
Yeah,
KB to
so
bold, Control KI to italicize. Yeah, people
everything
just don't
in MS
understand
DOS.
what that
Yep.
means. Yep. Oh no. Oh, I used WordStar on an Apple II clone. And we actually had to have, so this was when I was in high school, but we had my dad bought a Franklin Ace 1000, which was an Apple II clone, and
Mhm.
he had to install it. We had to install an 80 column card so it could do 80 column graphics, and a CPM board because WordStar didn't run in Apple DOS. It only ran in CPM, and so I was using CPM, which was another operating system. That was I used that before I used DOS.
Mm.
But back when I was in high school and the like. So yeah, it was fun. Those are some memories. I'll remember. I remember that stuff. That was a lot of fun. Word Perfect was crazy because it had the weird keyboard overlay where you hit like F3 to exit or Shift F3 or something like that.
I
Yeah.
always had trouble with whenever it was like checking my grammar.
Hmm.
Those were like early days and stuff like that. I think I
Oh
remember something
yeah.
about the tense of the verbs I'd use and that sort of thing. It's like, oh no, it's too passive. all the
Oh,
time. And I'm like,
oh yeah, Word still tells me that today. You're too passive, David.
mm. So
Ah,
yeah, I
yes.
mean, I think that growing up with a computer in the house
Hmm.
just gave me a competitive edge in a way because I was not afraid of computers. You know,
Okay.
I love playing on them. I love programming. Well, if you call, going around on files, in MS-DOS programming, it is. Well, back then, I
Yeah.
guess it looks a lot like programming today because of the use of
Well,
terminal. But no, so I just wasn't afraid of any of that. So yeah, so it was about 1995. I was just working temp jobs, just as
hmm
an assistant admin, but because I was
hmm
so proficient in computing, that always gave me an edge. So I was never out of work.
Good. Good.
So I was contracting for a very long time until I found a company that I liked, who liked me too, and that
Hmm.
happened to be Siemens. But back then, that was EDS PLM Solutions. That was when I
Right.
lived in St. Louis, you might recall.
Yep.
So yeah, the project I was on there was just really monkey work. Really, it was for the finance department trying to catch the bad invoices before the bad invoices went out to the mail,
Yep.
literally. But then I was like, hey, let's automate some of this. Here's
Yeah,
what we can
and
do.
we should mention, by the way, when we talk about mail there, we're not talking about email. We were talking about
No, we're talking
physically
about,
printed things that went in
mhm,
envelopes and then were delivered
yes,
by somebody.
yes,
This
and
is
there
this
actually
was
needed to
this
be
was the dark
someone,
ages.
me, yeah, there actually needed to be somebody, me, who stopped, the bad invoices. So yeah, but meanwhile, yeah, I was trying to help them, at that time, anyways, digitalize and automate some of those processes and everything to kind of improve our hit rate as far as catching those bad invoices. And it caught the attention of another manager in a different department, and he asked me to come interview, and I went and interviewed. And he thought I might have the chops to do what they needed to do, and so I was hired on as a business analyst at that time
Hmm.
for capital and asset management. So at that time, Siemens PLM was going global. It went through like a number of mergers and that sort of thing. So, where I started with just a small pool of 300 developers, where I was supporting them on their hardware refresh,
Hmm.
on their maintenance, contracts on that hardware, on the data center.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're now in cloud. Yeah. So I remember having a data center right there in St.
Oh yeah.
Louis. Yeah, on the leases, and then also managing the relationships between ourselves and our vendors. So you've
Hmm.
got Dell, Hewlett Packard, Sun. You've got uh, were there any others? No, those were the big three for the most
Oh
part.
yeah, son. I'd forgotten those guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, basically, what my manager wanted us to try to do is similarly to where I was automating those processes down for finance. He wanted
Hmm.
me to automate as much as we could do their capital planning and budgeting throughout the year, the
Hmm.
reporting all around that, and then also to because at that time they were using SAP,
Yep.
and we did have a huge team of SAP developers, but because of the limitations on the way that they did things,
Right.
it took a long time to get anything added, developed, or whatever the case may be. So he asked me to create what we call the web-based capital tool. You might
Hmm.
call it a web app these days, but we didn't have web apps back in those days.
Sure.
So I actually self-taught myself how to use basically a WAMP or a LAMP stack.
Hmm.
So PHP, MySQL on Apache, managing that on a small server, in our office, and just building up this web tool from scratch,
Yeah. Back
which
back in the
was
day when you could run a server under your desk. right?
Mm-hmm.
And many organizations did have servers just running under a desk, running mission critical applications
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
I
Yeah.
mean, I was with them for year 2000, or yeah,
Oh
remember
yeah,
that?
Y2K. Yeah.
Y2K?
Oh,
Mm.
well, and I always love people talk about, well, Y2K, it wasn't as bad as people said it was going to be. I'm like, well, that's because a lot of people worked really hard to make sure that it didn't turn out to be a bad thing. So I think of Y2K as one of the great triumphs of the IT industry in the 1990s is that it turned out to just being whatever, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to people getting trapped in elevators and airplanes crashing and all the things that could have happened when those kinds of things went south. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So yeah, so then after that, well, I worked there for about 8 years.
Hmm.
Um, the tool was a great success, huge success. The CEO loved it. He actually asked me to build another tool on top of it because the poor developers for SAP, for SAP, they just couldn't keep up with the innovation that these C-levels wanted to see.
Yep.
So they asked me to bolt on additional tools and everything to automate a lot of the internal processes and gain back a lot of business value, a lot of great data reporting
Hmm.
that and visibility and insights that they didn't have before. So
Yeah.
I was doing really well there.
Okay.
But then I met someone who lives in England and decided
Yeah.
to move over here.
Okay.
After we got married and everything, there was a bit of back and forth and everything, but I
Yeah.
eventually
I remember
settled
you guys
here.
lived in Houston for a little while.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah.
Before that stint, though, I came over to England, and
Hmm.
my first job here, I, I I really struggled in England to get
Hmm.
into the tech industry, um,
Okay.
because at that point, I guess I mean, we did have Twitter back then, back in the days when it was called Twitter,
Hmm.
but trying to break into those networks and everything just seemed really difficult, especially if you had a non-traditional tech background like what I had, right?
Right.
So
Right.
because you don't have a degree, oh, you can't prove anything, even though I
Yep.
built this really great tool for Siemens back in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to the local job center and
Okay.
picked up a job as an internet manager for a local health food store. And
Okay.
basically, their old operation used to be just we're eBaying some vitamins, more or less, but it's costing a lot. The owner had a really good vision there as far as like, yeah, there's a lot of potential with selling, supplements online in
Hmm.
general. But eBaying it, the shipping prices, the whole financial, model that they had around that just wasn't working for them. So he
Right.
was looking for somebody to fix that.
Okay.
And so I did.
Of
Basically,
course.
I got in there. I started, and it wasn't only just the tech side. It was also, the soft people skills, because as the internet manager, then I'm in charge of managing our pickers and our shippers. I'm in charge
Hmm.
of managing our customer service. I'm in charge of doing the regular ops. And then on top of that, I I basically I stole from Amazon's model. I looked at
No, no,
how
no, no, no.
Amazon
We call
ran
we
their
call we call that hallmarking when you care enough to steal the very
hallmarking.
best. See, when you care enough to
Yes,
steal the very best, and
it's
imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And Amazon built
absolutely,
and built an
absolutely.
incredible site. And every
They built a
e-commerce
great
site looks like
site.
it looks like Amazon now.
Well, it's not just this website itself, it's also all the
Hmm.
background
Oh yeah.
processes and everything like that. Because, for instance, what I did was that, the integrated tool that I ended up building for them, again, out of
Hmm.
PHP, MySQL, on an Apache stack, and a little server that sits under the desk. What I ended
Yeah.
up building out for them, though, it integrated all aspects. So just purchasing, uh, shipping, customer service issues, and everything. It was all integrated into one tool altogether. I even had the opportunity there to improve our quality assurance because, like, for instance, our shippers, they're simply packing boxes. They don't know about,
Yeah.
vitamins, and there really wasn't a great way of checking to make sure that everything that got picked was actually what was meant to be picked and everything. So I was able to add that additional step in, which of course reduced the load on customer service and that sort of thing because people were getting what they needed. I had like barcode readers. They didn't have that before.
Oh, wow.
And then I also integrated it with their point of sale downstairs, which when I first talked to the company that sold them their point of sale system, they're like, there's no way you can make it work. And I'm like, oh, yes, I will find a way. And that was actually the first time I worked with an API. So, and it worked.
Yeah.
So I pulled that off. But then I was feeling homesick. And that's when I came to live in Houston for a while.
Right.
And started having children.
Yeah.
As married women do.
Yes.
And yeah, basically, I mean, my maternity leave ended up being a lot longer than what I had ever anticipated. Because we had our son Arthur, and then we moved back over to England. And then I had my daughter Victoria. And so you'll already be aware, because we've been longtime friends, that Victoria is a childhood cancer survivor, and Arthur is autistic with ADHD. And so I had to take a number of years out from my career to look after them, to look after their health, to integrate them, into living, in Arthur's case at any rate. So, and that was really tough. And I wanted to go back to work, mostly because I was kind of burned out on care, to be fair, because that was a lot. That was a hell of a lot. So I was actually working through a local commerce center in St. Helens. So St. Helens Chamber of Commerce. They had a workshop there, or, well, I don't want to say workshop. It was kind of like a boot camp for getting back into work, period. Never mind, tech. And through that, that's where I learned about Tech Up Women. Okay. It just happened to land on it. It just seemed like such luck and such great timing and everything when that flyer landed to them and they showed it to me, and, because they were like, oh, Jenn, you used to be a techie here, Tech Up Women. And so I went to enroll and I got accepted, which was amazing. So what Tech Up Women was, it's a program that took into coordination 5 different universities that are well known in the UK. So you've got like University of Nottingham, you've got Edge Hill University, you've got University of York, and a couple of others. And they kind of combined together because there was a lot of recognition, at least here in the UK, that there is a huge tech gap, period. Never mind women or, being involved. And so it was founded by a person called Professor Sue Black. There's 2 Sue Blacks, though, in England. It's not the archaeologist, it's the technologist with the pink hair. So that's gotcha. Sue Black.
That's a good way. That's a good, not the archaeologist. That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. But at any rate, so no, she she's kind of she is a trailblazer and everything as far as like the arena of women in tech over in the UK. And because having a tech background and career and that sort of thing was so transformative for her life and everything, she wanted to replicate that and try to get as many women into tech as possible. And Tech Up Women is only one of the programs that she's launched. She's also known for another program that's called Tech Mums, which was to help women who are home on maternity leave access digital skills.
Yeah.
And then also she's best known, though, for she led the campaign and everything for restoring Bletchley Park.
Okay.
Do you remember the movie The Imitation Game?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Now, that's what I'm saying. Bletchley Park is. I was sitting there going to. Is that the one that? And now I remember. Now that you mentioned Imitation Game, that's the place where. Oh gosh, I can't remember his name right now. I'm a tech guy, and my mind went completely blank on the fellow's name. I remember that Cumberbatch played him in the movie, but I can't.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
I'm stuck
yeah,
with you there. But
yeah,
yeah,
I know.
she led that.
It's yeah. Well, he's the guy that lent his name to the concept of the is an AI truly alive? How do you tell it's an you know what Turing, Alan Turing. There we go. Finally
There you go.
remembered it.
You got it. You got it.
The Turing test. There we go. I
Yep.
knew I'd get it. I knew
So,
I'd get it eventually. I had to go down the right path.
so yeah, she headed up the campaign and everything for getting the funding and everything
Oh, that's
around
great.
restoring, Bletchley Park and all that. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so she's an amazing woman, a trailblazer in her own right, absolutely. But yeah, so she started Tech Up Women, to help specifically disadvantaged women in the Northwest and the North
Mm-hmm.
East and in the Midlands, because
Okay.
so much also in England is very London centric.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, well, if we're going to grow other tech hubs outside of London, we
Mm-hmm.
need to fill that skills gap and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
basically, they put together a 6-month program, a boot camp, extended boot camp, definitely, where we learned
Yeah.
all aspects of computer science in general, but at
That's
an
awesome.
accelerated rate. So yeah, it was absolutely awesome that sort of program came up at the time that it did for me, because it gave me a foothold back into the network for tech in general, and
Right.
that kind of
Right.
led the way as far as like getting me
And
back into tech. Because I mean, if you can't get into that bubble, you're out.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Well,
So
when my daughter was looking for her first job, I told her the hardest job you're ever going to get is the first job, right? And
mhm,
it really is true. And in this situation, you saw that when you first moved to England, how difficult it is to get into a network, but you didn't go to school there, you didn't do all these things there, you didn't know people. And then after having to take some time off and leaving the workforce, it's really hard to re-enter the workforce, even though people can sit there and say, well, why haven't you worked for 5 years? Or, well, I was taking care of my child. Oh, okay. Um, Even getting past that, they're like, well, and we all recognize how fast tech changes. I mean, think
mhm,
about 5 years ago, we were using so many different tools. Nowadays, if you don't know something about the cloud and something about AI,
forget
you're
it.
really going to be, you're not
You're gonna be
in a
locked
great
out.
spot. Yeah. So getting back on that I like to call it a treadmill, because it reminds me of the end of the Jetsons, where George is walking the dog and then he's like going wrapped around. That's what tech is like to me. It's this treadmill that no matter how fast you run, it's going to be faster. And so you got to pick your path, what you're going to be good at. So this
Mhm.
Tech Up Women, about how many people went through this with you in your cohort?
We were the first 100,
Ah,
and
okay.
actually 98 graduated.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
a
it
great
had an
graduation rate.
amazing retention rate and everything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing.
So, but I mean, it was also split out into 4 areas where they
Hmm.
had one for data, they had one for software engineering, which I went into the software engineering, even though I'm in data now. There was one for project management, and there was one for business analysis. So, kind of like
Hmm.
4 paths that you can choose, and you just split out into what fit the best. And at that time, for me, it was software engineering, because that was easy for me.
Yeah.
And then later on, I switched to tech. So when I graduated, though, well, they had made a lot of partnerships with private companies and even with
Hmm.
UK government. The only jobs in the Manchester area for me was working for GCHQ. So, and I don't have the right nationality to work for GCHQ. So
Sure.
that was when I heard about Tech Returners, which was
Okay.
Manchester based, who was
Hmm.
aligned with Manchester companies and everything. So they offered a boot camp that was around full stack web development
Hmm.
in oh, it was a lot of JavaScript,
Sure.
Node.js, with working with APIs, and then also with like MongoDB and things like that.
Mhm.
And basically, we go through their boot camp. And then at the end, we give a presentation. And ours was the first cohort that was affected by lockdown. So
Oh,
that was
yeah.
they had to switch their whole way of delivering everything, and they did an amazing job there. At any rate, so when I graduated from Tech Returners, somebody from CTS had seen my presentation, and
Mhm.
for that presentation, actually, we kind of went off we went off the template, if you will, because when they're prepping us for doing these presentations and everything, they have, if you do this, talk about that, that sort of thing. I was like, no, 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 no. Let's talk about what we got wrong and how we fixed it. And
Yep.
so our presentation was very different from everybody else's. I think that is what caught CTS's attention, really, was my willingness to say, okay, we messed up. We failed fast. How do we fix it, though?
Yeah.
And because, I mean, it goes beyond tech, any of that, really. It's
Mhm.
still, the tech industry is still so dependent on soft skills, and then problem solving,
Yeah.
and just how you work together as a team to pull together, for a specific goal.
Mhm.
And I think in a lot of recruiting that sort of idea gets lost. Doesn't matter what tech stack that you're
Yeah.
using. If you're not successful with those, you're not going to go anywhere in tech.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a great observation. When you start your career out, I think back to my career. When I started out my career, interview questions were, can you do this technical thing? Can you learn this technical programming language? And it was all about solving the bits and bytes and stuff like that. And as I've
mhm,
moved on in my career, it really has become, how do you understand the problem? How do you interface with the people who you need to interface with, right? Because those people won't speak in the bits and bytes. And so that becomes a much more, whether you're managing a project, or whether you're gathering requirements, or whether you're writing design documentation, whatever that has to be. If you want to move up in your career, and you don't want to just be slinging code your whole life, and there's nothing wrong with slinging code, don't get me wrong. I still occasionally like to, well, these days it's PowerShell, but I like to sling some PowerShell, right, here and there. But yeah, if you want to get further on, you do have to have that ability to interface and talk to people, and talk to people who are not techies. And
mhm.
so that
Yes,
interface is hugely important.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's
So
cool.
yeah,
So you finished this, and then that got you in with CTS, and you've
yep.
been with CTS now for how long?
3 years. And the first project I was
Awesome.
put on actually was for Census 2021
Oh, cool.
in the
Okay.
UK. So that was a massive project, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. They were trying to do 96% of the census online,
Hmm.
and I built out the monitoring solution for that site's performance, which was all done in a Google Cloud. Don't swear.
That's awesome. No, no,
But yeah.
I will say we are the Cloud Whisperers, though Brian and I are Microsoft people, right? We really, one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on is I do want to talk. We do. There are other cloud solutions out there, and they have their place in the world as well. And
Hmm.
I'm sure we've got people. Well, we are amongst our three listeners. I am sure that one of them probably cares about something other than. And hey, now we might have four listeners because we talk about Google now. See, we can increase our viewership by 25% just by including some Google talk on here. So, um, all right. So you've gone through this process, and this life journey to me is fascinating. And so, in a way, when I was coming up with the title for this episode, and for the three long time listeners of the Cloud Whispers, I try to put something hilarious and pithy into the titles. And so, obviously, 42 being the ultimate number from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Life, the Universe, and Everything. That's where we get Life, the Universe, and the Cloud Whispers. But it also fits really well, Jenn, with your journey, which is really a journey about a life that is full of events, and just you know the obstacles we have to overcome. And you know, I've you know, like I said, you and I have known each other for a very long time. I've watched Arthur and Victoria growing up, and it has been such a I won't say it's a pleasure's not the right term, but it's been, I've admired watching you and your husband going through this process, and as you say, raising some kids that are going to that when they finish growing up, because they're a little bit younger than my kids, but when they finish growing up are going to be well-adjusted members of society, and that in the end, as my dad would have said, is the true hallmark of a life well lived, is that when your kids grow up to be good people. So my hat is off to you in that regard. So as we kind of get near the end of your journey, right? What advice would you give to somebody today, whether they're a woman or whether they're not, right? If they've been out of the workforce and they want to get back in, what's some advice that you would give them that kind of helped you through your journey?
Don't give up. Find your allies.
Okay.
Ask for help. Lean in on all that. Not everything will go according to plan, but
Yeah.
sometimes doing just a little bit is enough to tip the balance into your favor and help other things, you know, carry on. You know, I
Hmm.
had to do a lot of that as far as like, you know, of course, making the transition from being a stay-at-home mom and having to relinquish a lot of, you know, the household responsibilities. For instance, I had to accept that,
Hmm.
you know, things aren't going to be as clean as I would have done it, or, you know, it's not done my way or whatever. No, but it was actually very freeing, that
Hmm.
letting go of that, and letting, you know, my husband and my children do the problem solving there for their pieces of work there,
Yeah.
and helping them grow. And so you know, like I said, just for one thing, just don't give up.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, most situations are just temporary.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Yeah.
And if someone wants to be an ally, right? If somebody is saying, you know, um, I want to help somebody out like Jenn, right? What advice would you give to them? To what does it take to be a good ally, to help somebody to get back in the workforce, to help
Mm.
women, whether it's male or female, right? But to help somebody like yourself, what would you? Because you mentioned as an example that what led to your job was that somebody from CTS actually saw your presentation and said, "Hey, this is a person that I think I want to come work at my company." So what advice would you give them?
Listen carefully.
Hmm.
Be creative. Recognize transferable skills
Hmm.
that are invaluable. You know, because again, we've already touched on the whole. It's not just knowing the code. It's everything that goes around that, as far as, you know, taking care of the customer, watching out for stakeholders' needs. You know, managing this, that, or the other. And, you know, especially for moms, you know, we manage loads of stuff all the time.
Oh yeah.
There are so many transferable skills there that
Hmm.
are invaluable in the workplace that, you know, either women aren't thinking about, or male hirers don't recognize.
Yep. I can understand that completely. There is no better project manager than a mom who runs a household with school age kids. I keep telling my wife if she ever wanted to get a job as a project manager, she could easily do it, because keeping my
Nail it.
son, my son who's autistic and ADD, keeping him to keep to ensure that he gets his work turned in on time, or at least close to on time. I there are project managers who would
The
kill for that
negotiating there
ability.
alone.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, oh yes. Uh, well, Jenn, I want to thank you very, very much for taking some time out of your day and
Mm.
telling us a little bit about your story. It has been fascinating. I've been watching it from the outside, but it was neat to kind of get it in one chunk from beginning to end. And I wanted to say, you know, as the three longtime listeners of our podcast would know, we have come to that time of our show, which we call One Last Thing. And today, for our one last thing, in true Cloud Whisperers fashion, I'm going to talk about something that I know that nobody else has seen. Uh, um, but it does resonate because it is tech. So this weekend, my wife and I took our son to go see a movie called The Creator, which is a sci-fi movie. Uh, and unusually for today, it's not related to superheroes or to Star Wars or something like that. It's actually its own standalone franchise. And it's set around 2060 or so. Okay, so about 40 years in the future. And the basic concept is that we've created stable AI. Okay. And then from stable AI, we've also created um, lots of robots that are running AI. And so you can think of the robots like you see the company in Massachusetts that's building, right? They don't really look like people, but they've got basic, two arms, two legs, and a head kind of thing. But then in addition to that, they've also perfected technology to make a basically put a human face on a robot to make it look like a person. The back of the head is not, if you've seen the previews, it's got like a hole. I don't know why it has a hole in the center that spins around, but it's special effects, right? And of course the reason they do this is so they can take like the main actors in the film, like Ken Watanabe is one of the main actors. They can put his face, or they can make him wear like a green stocking in the back of his head, basically, so they can digitally put in the robot part, which makes the whole thing a lot easier to do from a production standpoint. But the basic premise of this movie, and I found it interesting, and this is what I wanted to talk with Jenn about, is, it's that starts out with suppose the way the story goes, AI ends up turning against humanity, and they blow up Los Angeles. They blow up a nuke in Los Angeles and kill millions of people, and so now this war breaks out across the entire world, and the humans decide we have to wipe out AI. We have to destroy it, because if AI exists, we're at risk. If you hear Joker in the background barking, he's saying, "Why did I not get my walk this morning?" So, dude, we're talking movies here. One of my favorite topics. So anyway, when we look at this, this battle ensues, and we're now in the end game of this war, and they have this, I think, just for cool special effects, they have this like thing called Nomad, which is this kind of semi spaceship that flies around and drops bombs on bad guys, or as we so AIs. And they've sent this guy in undercover to try to get close to the creator, which is the person who created the AI, so they can find out who they are. And if they figure if they can kill this guy, then the AIs will all die out and they'll be able to win the war. And he has met this woman who's the daughter of the creator, and they have fallen in love, and she is pregnant, and all the stuff like that. So anyway, all of this stuff you get from the trailer, right? And eventually he ends up with this little, I'll call it a child. It's a 5-year-old AI, and it's not clear from the trailer if he has to protect them or do something with them. And I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody, if you want to go see it. But the crux of the point of this thing is that the movie portrays AI as, peaceful and in many ways more human than the humans are. Right? They just want to live in harmony. They will raise human children. They will do all these things, and the humans are the ones who are trying to genocide them out of existence, right? So it is kind of the flipping of the script from like the Terminator, where Skynet comes alive and decides I have to wipe out all the humans, right? So first off, the first question I will pose for us to discuss really quickly is, how likely is it that in 40 years we will actually have developed something that we would call AI, in the sense that it could be like a sentient entity that has human or near human or even post-human intelligence levels? And so my thinking originally is that I don't think we're that close, right? I don't think we're that close to creating AI. But then I was also going back and saying, well, what was 40 years ago? That was 1983. And when I think about the tech stack of 1983, right, I was using a Franklin Ace 1000, okay, an Apple II clone, and boy, that was a very different computer than what we have today. And the amazing, I mean, the ability to do what we're doing right now, talking to each other across thousands of miles and 6 time zones, and then shooting this out to the internet so that all 3 of our subscribers can watch it and enjoy it, right? That's a pretty big leap for 40 years. So Jenn, what do you think? Do you think in 40 years we might actually have, like, anthropomorphic robots
Something that'll look like that easy. Yeah.
yeah. See,
Yeah.
I guess I think it's hard to say that anybody. On the one hand, I still kind of poo-poo it, because I look at the cognitive services today, and I look at, like, I've got a friend who's got a Tesla, right? And I've ridden in the Tesla and I've seen the auto drive feature. And, I remember back when I was in high school, they were just piloting some of this auto drive stuff. And Carnegie Mellon University drove a van from Pittsburgh to Pennsylvania without a human doing it. And they had cameras up and everything. And I was like, that's really cool. We're like right there. And now, it has been 40 years and we're not quite right there. Because what we've discovered is, and this is the part that I think is fascinating, is that if you look at, like, the stuff that I work with Microsoft Syntax, right, which is document recognition, I'm looking at a document, I'm picking out keywords. When you look at what it's actually doing, you still have to train it. You still have to teach it. And while you can take some shortcuts, it's just doing pattern recognition. And its pattern recognition is not as flexible as throwing carbon at the problem, right? A human. Our brains, our abilities are so much more flexible that
we also had a few million years on
that is very, very true. And I would say that our hardware, right, is substantially more. I mean, the human eye is still a very powerful tool for delivering, visual imagery into the brain, right? So I would put myself down as a skeptic that in 40 years we'll have made that much progress. But then again, we've made an awful lot of progress in 40 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, largely, I mean, if you understand the way that machines learn and that sort of thing, it's actually not too unlike the way basic brain wiring works. Okay. And so it's just more or less multiplying that. So having, for instance, all the great training data, for instance, and training data by itself is such a huge deal insofar as, like, considering ethics, considering diversity around that sort of thing. There's, several great books out there that discusses a lot of that. I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh. Oh, I can't remember. She basically, I can't remember her name offhand, but basically her whole book was about how technology is built around a men's point of view, a man's body, for instance. So, like, whenever, like, for instance, doing crash test dummies for car crashes, and the design of the seatbelt and that sort of thing is male. Okay, so where a male body would be saved, a female's body or a child's body, no luck. That sort of thing. So she just basically, I can't remember her name straight off. You'll probably have to ask me later, but she does take a look at, scientific surveys and that sort of thing. And, more or less delivers the message that, all these things are built around the male body, physique, mindset, all that. And diversity is so integral to getting the right training data to get it right with AI.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Are you trying to look that up?
Yeah, I was trying to look it up, and it was also reminding me. I have a picture I was going to share, and I'll try to put it in the show notes. And it had a concept design for car safety belts from the 60s. Okay. And
Hmm.
it's got this man and this woman sitting in this convertible. Okay. And I was, when you said that we've designed safety belts for men as opposed to for men and women, right? It had a picture of a man and a woman, and they're sitting in the car and they have their lap belts on, right? And then it's got this belt that attaches behind on the seat behind them and comes up right across their throat.
Oof.
and I haven't figured out yet if it's photoshopped or if it's just all a joke, or if somebody actually thought, hey, if I put this belt across your neck, it'll
It'll
stop
stop
you from going forward. And I'm like, once it'll
them.
stop you
Yeah.
once.
I don't think that one got past prototype.
No, I don't think so either. But it has the guy driving, and then the woman is sitting in the passenger seat, and they both are wearing this belt around their necks, and I'm just kind of going, hmm. So I had to send that to a friend of mine. Maybe I'll post that up as well. People can take a look at it. So
But
yeah,
no, because of all the computing and everything that we have, to our disposal. I mean, if you think about how many data centers between,
mhm.
the major cloud providers, for instance, and if all that compute united and we get some good training data, I mean, there is still a lot of smokes and mirrors and, a lot of, high gloss and everything as far as like what AI is, today, as far
Sure,
as, and I'm thinking about like large learning models, language
yeah,
models rather. But as far as, the method to use, for training a machine to recognize patterns,
hmm
you know, very much the same way most people learn, through repetition, recognizing patterns, that sort of thing,
yeah.
from early stage development. I'm talking, like toddler age and that sort of thing.
Well,
I think it's
that's
possible.
how we learn to speak, right? Is by
Mm,
hearing people speak all the time, over and over and over
hmm.
again,
Even in the womb.
and yeah, even in the womb. So, what I find interesting about AI and cognitive services these days is that, we always talked about how it's going to replace the manual labor jobs, right? We're going to have a janitor bot as opposed to somebody who's actually mopping the floor and cleaning, right? And we're going to have, track,
We've got Roombas.
well, yeah, they work okay. But what I found fascinating is the place where AI is really making a play in business is actually at a higher level. And did you ever see the movie Working Girl with Melanie
Yeah.
Griffith and Harrison Ford? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
so I used this analogy a lot for a lot of different reasons, because Working Girl is a fascinating movie. It came out, I want to say late 80s, early 90s, in that time frame,
yes.
right? And Melanie Griffith is a secretary for Sigourney Weaver. And when Sigourney Weaver wants to work on the Robertson file, she says, hey, Melanie Griffith, get me the Robertson file. And she may have it on her desk. And if she doesn't, she'll call up a file clerk and say, hey, bring me the Robertson file. And somebody has to go into the stacks and go find the Robertson file, which they have a taxonomy and they have an index that they have built that is established at a corporate standard, and they pull that thing out and then deliver it to Melanie Griffith, who then takes it into Sigourney Weaver, who looks it, reads it, maybe dictates a memo, which is typed up and signed, and then the copy's put into the Robertson file, which is then put back into there. And you think about that, and then you think about what we then did is we gave everybody a personal computer, right? And we said, well, now you don't need a secretary anymore, and now you don't need that file clerk anymore. And it works great if it's just you. But if Sigourney Weaver needs to collaborate with somebody else, we still need that taxonomy, right? We still
Yeah.
need to be able to have that file clerk. We need to have that filing system, right? And so I use this a lot when I'm talking with customers about how do you organize your data, right? And why you need to have taxonomy and why you need to have this stuff. But what I also see AI really being valuable is being able to say that thing of, I need the Robertson file, right? And now we can have AI that goes out and says, okay, I'm going to go look in a bunch of different places and I'm going to pull data back for you. And even sometimes I'm going to pull back related data that you didn't think to ask for, because
Mm,
I'm smart enough to recognize that because you asked for that, you may also want these other 3 files that are similar to the Robertson file that can give you more information. And that's where we
mhm.
see a lot of stuff happening with those large language learning models. And then especially sitting on top of unstructured data, internal unstructured data. So like Microsoft is launching Copilot, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Mm-hmm.
That concept of, hey, I'm going to take an LLM and I'm going to put it on top of the Graph API so that I can
Mm-hmm.
let you search your internal stuff, and give you that Chat GPT or OpenAI like effect over your internal stuff. That's where
Right.
I really see AI over the next decade becoming super valuable for organizations,
I
is in
think we'll
doing
have
that
that
kind of stuff.
capability within the next 3 years, easy, maybe even
Okay.
shorter. That sort of capability.
You may very well be right. I think where organizations are starting to find out that there's problems with that, right, is that so many organizations don't have that taxonomy, right? And this is why I remember when Microsoft first launched their big search tool, and then they launched Delve, and they were like, it's going to solve all your problems because you'll be able to search and find stuff. Yeah, but if it's not tagged well, if it's not stored in an appropriate location, if it's not secured properly, then you're going to find stuff you're not supposed to find. You're going to not find what you're looking for. So we still need that taxonomy, and that's not something that currently I see the large language learning models and the cognitive services being good at. They can extract metadata from documents, right?
I was going to say, what about metadata?
Yeah. Well, but just the extraction of metadata doesn't actually solve your problem of organizing it in a taxonomy properly, right? Because I can look at a document and I can say, oh, I recognize that this is an invoice, and I can get who it's from and who it's to and the date and the dollar amount and stuff like that. But if it's a memo, or if it's a status report, right, it's a little bit more difficult to figure out, well, what's the relevant pieces of metadata around that? That's something that we're still having to think about. I'll mention status reports again. If I talk about a status report, right, what's important about a status report? What pieces of information are going to make it most important for you 2 years from now, finding that particular piece of information, right? And that's something that the cognitive services, in my opinion, aren't there yet. They might get there pretty soon. Okay, you may be right. I may be way too pessimistic in how usable they're going to be. I am often surprised. I use Grammarly, which I'm very surprised at what a good job it does, considering I'm a terrible typist. I think it's finally cured me of just writing in the passive voice all the time. But it is so it really is amazing what they can do. But at the same time, I don't know. I get right. Put me down as a skeptic, and you know what? We can have this podcast again in 40 years, Jen, and you and I can sit down and in our rocking chairs and go, well,
I'd
I
certainly
remember
love
when.
to be there.
I certainly
And
hope
what
so
we
as
were
well.
talking about. Yeah.
Well, Jen, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. We have to do this again. I just want to tell everybody, thank you very much for listening to the podcast today. You can follow us on YouTube. As always, at the Cloud Whisperers. We're on all of the major podcasting platforms. I'm throwing it all up on the scroller now. We're on Apple Podcasts, and we're on Spotify, and we're on Google Podcasts, and you can always go to SoundCloud and get our audio versions. We're obviously posting the video versions now up on YouTube and the like. And we're about to launch cloudwhisperers.net. I mean, technically it's live, but cloudwhisperers.net is going to be our web home. And so you'll be able to actually send some emails to us at David or Brian at cloudwhisperers.net. And I've got a few blog posts up there. And the AI has told me that I've written very good blog posts. So you'll have to go out and check those out. But other than that, Jen, it's been great. I look forward to us having this conversation again at some point in the future. And say
Sure.
hello to the whole family for me, okay?
I sure will. And same for you.
Take care, okay?
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Thank you.